Hi everyone, my name's Andre and welcome back to Med School EU. And the topic of today's video is going to be the immune system. So this is the last major organ system that we'll be covering in this unit of anatomy and physiology. There is one more to go after this, but it won't be covered fully in this stage. It will also involve the homeostasis unit. Therefore, this is officially the last organ system that we will cover. And this is the last topic that we're going to talk about in terms of anatomy and physiology. However, it will pertain of several videos. Because the immune system is so complex and there's so many things we don't know about it, and there's so many things we do know about it, we're going to have to keep this very brief, very short, and just include the things in the surface level, just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, because this is one of the most less understood systems that we have after our brain, and therefore there won't be too much that we're going to have to cover, because it goes extremely extensively and very complicated. But in terms of high school knowledge, there's going to be limited things we'll have to know. So just to overview what the immune system is of course it protects from disease, it protects from infections, and that is its primary functions. It's the things that keep you alive. The immune system is continuously functioning, it is always alert, it is always working, and it is something that keeps us alive, and it's extremely important. There's a lot of organs that are involved in response with the immune system, but the major kind of highway that it uses is the lymph nodes and the lymph system. Now, the cells of the immune system that are used to attack pathogens, they must recognize what is self and what is non-self, because if the immune cells are going to recognize the self cells as non-self, they're going to recognize them as enemies, and then they're going to attack them. And when this occurs, when the immune cells attack the self, so they attack healthy cells, this causes autoimmune diseases. Now the question is, how does the immune system recognize self from the non-self? And typically that is done with glycoproteins. So healthy cells are going to have the surface receptors, so they're going to have little receptors on their cell membranes that will be sticking out, that will be signaling it's the selves, and these are formed by glycoproteins. So it's a combination of sugars, carbohydrates, and proteins, and these molecules will be there to indicate to the large phagocytes that they cannot just come in and eat them, because they are self, they are allies, they are part of the same system. Whereas a bacteria would come in, it would have different glycoproteins on its surface, and therefore the cells of the immune system would recognize that, and they would perform phagocytosis to remove them from the body. Now, another important thing to mention about the immune system is that it's composed of two parts: the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Now, the innate immune system is something that responds immediately as soon as an infection occurs. Let's say you cut your finger and you have bacteria that are on the knife that you cut your finger with. They're going to innate inside, and even the bacteria just from the surfaces are going to enter inside of your skin and inside the body, and the innate immune system is the one that is going to respond immediately and begin the fighting process. Now, the adaptive immune system is something that occurs later on. If the help is needed, the adaptive immune system will be able to be activated by the innate immune system, and the adaptive immune system is much stronger response, and it creates things like memory cells in order to recognize these sorts of attacks later on if they occur again and again. So typically the innate immune system, what happens is it is the first responders kind of doing like CPR, first aid, and the adaptive immune system is the hospitals and the clinics that are be able to assess the patient further, do operations and other things like that. So that's the two ways of thinking about the immune system as it pertains as it has two different parts and two different types of responses. These responses will be covered in the next video. There will be too much to cover in one video if we talk about everything that is involved with the immune system, so I decided to split it up into two videos. The first video will talk about an overview of the immune system. We'll mention the cells that are involved and what they do, and in the next video we're going to talk about the innate versus the adaptive immune response. So let's take a look at the cells of the immune system. So this is the complete division of the cells of the immune system. There's quite a lot. However, we're just going to cover the names of these and briefly what they do. And of course, we're not even going to include a lot of the cells that are part of this diagram. I just wanted to show how complex the immune system is and how many different types of cells it actually involves. So we begin with the hematopoietic stem cell. So that's the stem cell right here. This stem cell is the one that develops the rest of the cells of the immune system. Now the stem cell would split into two types of cells, and there's generally two types of cells in the immune system. They all fall under these two categories, as you can see based on the diagram. On the top here, we're going to have the lymphoid cells, and at the bottom here, we're going to have the myeloid. Now, the myeloid cells are going to produce 5 different cells, and I want you to note the way they actually look. They've got this weird nucleus. So the one on the top is called a neutrophil. The one in the middle is called a eosinophil, and the one here at the bottom is a monocyte. Now the other two cells that are made directly from the myeloid is going to be a mast cell and a basophil. And finally, from the monocyte, we would produce the dendritic cell, so the one that has all these sticky, pointy sides, that's the dendritic cell, and a macrophage. So the two cells that we're definitely going to talk about are going to be the macrophage and the neutrophil, and a little bit about monocytes as well. Now, if we're looking at the lymphoid cell and what type of cells are made out of that, we're going to have B cell precursor to B cells, so B cell pre. We're going to have a killer cell in the middle here, and the one on the side there is a T cell precursor. Now, from the T cell, it's going to produce 3 different T cells. It's going to produce memory T cell, we'll have a cytotoxic T cell, and the helper T cell. And from the B cell precursor, we're going to generate memory B cells and a plasma cell. So we're going to discuss all of these, but primarily they will be discussed in the second video. We're just going to quickly mention about B cells and T cells in general, and for the most part we're going to talk about the myeloids, monocytes, neutrophils, and macrophages. So the immune system is split into 2 types of cells, as mentioned. We've got the phagocytes and the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes would include B cells and T cells. Phagocytes would include neutrophils, macrophages, and the monocytes. So let's discuss monocytes or the phagocytes first. Phagocytes are cells that do phagocytosis. And phagocytosis meaning that it's going to engulf cells. It's called cell eating. So basically when a bacteria or a pathogen or microorganism comes along that where it shouldn't be in the body, the phagocytes, the cells, are going to attack it, and they're going to engulf it, dissolve it, and get rid of it. Now these phagocytes are produced and stored in the bone marrow. Phagocytes are typically scavengers, so they're going to go all around, throughout the body, and what their major function is to remove dead cells and to remove invasive microorganisms. So they would be called scavengers, kind of searching around the body, looking for microorganisms that shouldn't be there and looking for dead cells to clean them up. Now let's talk about neutrophils and macrophages, the 2 major types of phagocytes. The neutrophils make up 60% of white blood cells in the blood. So primarily the blood is composed the white blood cells are composed primarily of neutrophils, and they circulate, the patrol throughout the body, so their main function is to patrol. And when an infection occurs, we are going to have a response, and this is going to be an innate immune response. And during this infection, plenty of neutrophils are going to be released in great numbers, and they're going to vigorously attack the pathogens that have entered the body. So they're very vicious. They kill rapidly. However, they have a very short lifespan. So these cells actually do the phagocytosis. Now, if we're talking about macrophages, they are originally made in the bone marrow as monocytes. So we discussed monocytes lead to macrophages, and so originally it is made in the bone marrow as monocytes. Then the monocytes are going to circulate around the blood, and as they leave the blood, they're going to develop into macrophages as they settle in organs. So they typically reside in organs. They have a long lifespan, so they are long-lived, much longer than the neutrophils, but also going to be viciously dissolving different microorganisms that enter the body as part of the immune response. But the difference is they do not directly destroy the pathogens fully. And what I mean by that is they play a role in initiating the adaptive immune response by cutting pathogens and displaying their antigens, so displaying little pieces of the pathogens on their surfaces that can be recognized by the lymphocytes. And lymphocytes are the cells, the B and the T cells, that are part of the adaptive immune response. And we're going to talk this in more detail in the next video, but I wanted to just give you a quick introduction because it is part of the duties of the macrophages. It's their function to initiate and to they play a crucial role in initiating the adaptive immune response by not simply dissolving the pathogens completely, but what they're going to do is they're going to cut them into pieces, and they're going to display their antigens on their surface. Therefore, the B cells and the T cells are able to find them and bind to them and begin dividing and initiating the adaptive immune response. So what is phagocytosis and how does it actually occur? So we have to begin with an infection of the body. So when an infection of the body occurs, we're going to have cells that will be under attack, and they're going to release histamine. Now, once the cells are being destroyed by the infection of microorganisms like bacteria or viruses, they're attacking our healthy cells. Some of them are going to release histamine. Histamine is an inflammatory chemical, and it's going to spread all around the body as it kind of signals, and it is going to go to the bloodstream, it's going to go to the lymph nodes, and it's going to signal that there is an infection going on, there is cells dying, there is trouble. The immune system must come and help. The first responders, of course, the neutrophils, are going to be attracted to the histamine call. So neutrophils are going to be those first responders that will get to the site. Also, the site is going to be flooded with blood and water and different substances, and that is part of the inflammatory response that we will talk about in the next video. However, what I wanted to point out here is how this phagocytosis begins and how it happens. So once these neutrophils arrive at the site of infection because of the call of histamine, and this whole process is called chemotaxis because it is attraction of this chemical, neutrophils' attraction to the chemical that promotes the neutrophils flooding into the area. Then the neutrophils are going to engulf the pathogen via phagocytosis, so that's going to be endocytosis. They are, as you can see in this diagram, they're going to wrap around the bacteria, and they're going to fully surround them and fully engulf it in its own cell. And once inside the cell, the lysosomes that are inside the cell are going to release enzymes. They're going to release digestive enzymes. An example of digestive enzymes that they release are going to be proteases. And after several kills from the neutrophil, they are going to deplete their batteries, they're going to deplete their energy, and the neutrophil is going to do self-destruction. It's going to kill itself. And all of those neutrophils that are going to die and they're going to kill themselves, they form this pus that we get from an infected area. That is the action of neutrophils sacrificing themselves to keep you alive from the dangers of rapidly dividing bacteria or rapidly dividing viruses or other parasites and pathogens that may enter the body. Now let's talk a little bit about lymphocytes, and that's typically lymphocytes are part of the adaptive immune response. They are the classic B and the T cells, and lymphocytes are going to be smaller than the phagocytes. However, they're going to have a much larger nucleus. So the nucleus is going to fill almost the entire cell as their distinctive feature when you're looking through a light microscope. And there are two types that we are going to discuss. The two types are B and T cells. So we will talk about the general B and T cell, where they come from and how do they mature, and then in the next video we'll discuss more about their action in the adaptive immune response. But in general, both are produced in bone marrow, so that they are born in the bone marrow, and they develop in the bone marrow before the child's birth. So while the fetus is being developed, the B and the T cells are going to be forming in the bone marrow. And only mature lymphocytes can perform immune responses. So the immune cells that are born in the bone marrow are not mature yet. They're going to have to go through a process before they're able to act. So only mature lymphocytes will be able to carry out responses of the adaptive immune system. Now, during the maturation process, after they're born in the bone marrow, the B and the T cells could be made in a variety of different ways with millions of different combinations. And the reason for that is because there are going to be millions of different pathogens that can infect the body, and therefore the B and the T cells must be specific to one antigen. So from the millions of different combinations that are possible, this is why our B and the T cells are able to bind to a specific pathogen even if it's never seen it before. It's fascinating how our immune system works in this way, and that's why our adaptive immune system is just so incredible and so diverse and so compact with information that we still have not discovered everything about it, and it's the least understood after the brain. But once the B and the T cells are mature, they circulate in the blood and the lymph. Now let's take a look at the similarities and the differences between the B and the T cells. So beginning with the B cells, they will be born in the bone marrow and they're going to mature in the bone marrow. Then once they're mature in the bone marrow, they're going to spread all around the body and concentrate in the lymph and the spleen. Now, if we're talking about T cells, they are going to mature in the thymus. So they're going to leave the bone marrow and they're going to collect in the thymus and they're going to mature in the thymus, which is, and the thymus is a gland that is considered the university of T cells. And it is a deadly university because it kills 98% of T cells that enter it. And basically, in terms of education, what type of education it does is the thymus is going to educate the T cells to be able to recognize self and the non-self, because it's going to be extremely detrimental if T and B cells, these very, very powerful cells, are going to recognize self and they will attack the self, then that could be deadly for the body. Therefore, the thymus is a brutal, deadly university where most T cells are going to die. They're not going to make it, and only about 2% of T cells that enter the thymus are going to mature and properly do their adaptive immune response. So in the thymus, this is where they are educated. Now, as soon as they graduate from the Death University of Thymus, they are going to spread all around the body. And just to mention a couple of other things about the thymus, is that the thymus is basically a gland in the chest beneath the sternum, and it grows 2 times its size from birth to puberty, and then afterwards, after puberty, it's going to shrink. So this is why our immune system is not going to be as responsive, it's not going to be as strong as we age past puberty. So this concludes our first video on the immune system. In the next one, we are going to talk about the innate immune response versus the adaptive immune response in greater detail.